Hello, this is Jennifer Martinez. In this video, we're going to go over section 8.2, the distributive law, which is on page 4 of your class notes notebook. The distributive law gives two different ways of calculating the same number. For instance, suppose your bill at a restaurant is A dollars and your friend's bill is B dollars, and you want to calculate the tip. You want to pay 20% tip. There are two ways to calculate the total tip. The first way is to look at the total bill. So if your bill is A dollars and your friend's bill is B dollars, A plus B is your total bill. So 20% of the total tip would be 0.2 of A plus B. You might be wondering where I got 0.2. Well, let's review percentages. What does 20% mean? 20% means out of 100. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 20 out of 100. And if I do this on my calculator, we know that that is 0.20, or you don't need that extra zero, so I just called it 0.2. Makes sense, because if I had 50% of the population we know is half, that would be 50 out of 100, which we do know is 1/2, and if you do that on your calculator, it's 0.5. You could call it 0.50 if you wanted, but that zero is not needed. It means 50 out of 100. So whenever you need to calculate a percent, you always need to get it in the decimal form. This is just a saying, and here is the actual number. The second way of calculating the tip is to look at each bill. So say you want to figure out 20% of your bill. So it'd be 0.2 times A. Then we're going to add that to your friend's tip, which is 0.2 times B. So that means that these two things are equal. If you skip down below at the bottom here, here's the actual law that you've probably seen before. For any number A, B, and C, if you have A, parentheses B plus C, you can write it as AB plus AC, which is what is done here. If you notice, if I multiply these two, I get 0.2A plus 0.2B, or 0.2B, you can say. That zero is actually not needed as well. You could have just said 0.2. Likewise, there are two ways of finding the area of the rectangle. The total width is, so we could say the total width is 2 plus 4. So the total area would be the length times the width would be 3, 2 plus 4, which by the way is 3 times 6. Which is 18. The units, by the way, are centimeters squared because we have a length. If you remember from the section below, area equals length times width. So we have centimeters times centimeters, which is square centimeters. You can write it like this. So that tells me this is 3 and this is 6, there's 18 squares that are 1 centimeter by 1 centimeter long, which is what area means. Or we could calculate the two smaller rectangles, the area of the two smaller rectangles. So let's see, the first one we know is right here, this rectangle, which is 3 times 2. And the second one, we know this is 3 centimeters by 4, so that's 3 times 4. So we have 3 times 2 plus 3 times 4, which by the way is 6 plus 12, which is also 18. And again, you can write it either way, centimeters squared or square centimeters. Again, right here, 3 times 2 plus 3 times 4 is the distributive law. If you have more than 2 terms, you can still apply the distributive law. You just need to do it repeatedly. We can see that the multiplication distributes over sum of any numbers So what they did here is they took the first two as 1, so a, b plus c, and then plus a times d, and then distribute again, and you'll get ab plus ac plus ad. So essentially, you don't need to do this every time. You just take a and you multiply it by each term. So in example 1, where they ask us to use the distributive law to rewrite each expression without parentheses, you're going to take this and multiply that, and they do not need to be like terms to multiply. By the way, this one is negative times a negative. If you remember from your, so what I'm going to do here is negative times a positive is negative, and a negative times a negative is a positive. If you remember from your negative values, two negatives multiplied together is a positive. You have to be very careful because negative 3 plus negative 3 we know is negative 6. But negative 3 times negative 3 is actually 9. Again, if you're need a little bit of help with videos, I do have a topic video on negative numbers. So this would be a plus 9x squared. And then finally, two negatives on this one. We would have a plus, 3 times 2 is 6, and be x cubed. That is true because negative 3x times negative 2x squared is positive 6x, and there's one copy here, two copies there, that makes 3 copies. Part B, you can do it twice. You can do 3c minus 3d, but we still have that d there. So then if I do it this way, the a could be on the left or the right. You can make this 3cd minus 3d squared. So that would be the answer to both of those. Continuing on the next page, page 5. What happens when you have just a negative outside a parentheses? Well, we know that negative x, right, when it's just an x, we've talked about that before, it has a 1. So negative x means negative 1x. So the distributive law tells us how to distribute negative signs. When you have minus parentheses b plus c, it's really like a minus 1 times b plus c. And then we distribute that through, and you end up with minus 1 with a b plus a minus 1 with a c, which is minus b plus minus c. Let's do the first exercise together, and then I'll have you work on the other ones. If you do want to pause this first, go ahead. But here's how we do part A. I'm just going to make that a 1 there. And I'm going to make this a 1 here. And so here, I'm going to take negative 1 and distribute. Now, we don't have to do all the steps here. We don't have to write the negative 1 every time. In fact, you don't even have to write this. You can just write, it's a negative c, but negative 1, and there's another 1 here. So negative times a negative is a positive. This would be a minus d, or you can call it minus 1d if you'd rather. And then finally, you're going to distribute this negative through. Because this is like saying plus a negative, right? We always can take a minus and put plus a negative on that. So I can even write it that way if that would make you happier. So that's why that's a negative d, and then this would be a negative c. The d's do cancel because this is a 1 and a negative 1, so you end up with minus 2c. So go ahead, I would like you to pause now and try B and C, and I'll give the answers in a minute. Are you ready for the answers? The answers are k cubed and 1. That one was negative 2c. So I did do one or two little steps here just so you can see. I decided to, inside parentheses comes first. I cannot combine these, so I went and used the distributive law to get rid of this inner parenthesis, negative n plus k. But then I realized that the n's cancel, so I didn't have to do anything with that cubed. Just called it k cubed. You could put it in parentheses or not. This one, whoop, that's a 1 there, imaginary 1. So I was a negative 5 and then a plus x, because you have to use that negative 1. The x's cancel and you end up with 1. When you have fractions, when you have a over b, we know that's equivalent to 1 over b times a, because if you multiply this, you put that over 1, you would get a over b. So that is the same. So one way of doing this, I could do that way. I could make this as a negative 1/3, right? Just put that on the outside, negative x plus y. That's one way I can do that, which distributed that now would be a 1/3 x, and then minus 1/3 y. And then if I put that back to the way that it was, you would have their answer. If you want to do it another way, not use this rule, you could have just divided both. Let me rewrite this. Divide both by the negative 3. So it would be negative x over negative 3 plus y over negative 3. 2 negatives is a positive, and you have the same answer as well. Distributing more complicated expressions. Sometimes the distributive property can be used when a, b, or c is not just a single variable or number. So for instance, if you have a plus b times c plus d, we can use the distributive property twice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a and multiply it by c plus d. And then I'm going to do the whole thing, plus b times c plus d. I'll show you the arrows in a minute. If I multiply now this is going to be AC plus AD, BC plus BD, which probably you recognize as FOIL. That's what I was about to do. This is the first, this is the outer, inner, and last. Sometimes they don't do it this way, they just go straight to that. So FOIL, this is what that stands for. To see this with our rectangle, right, you can see that this is the a plus b, this is the c plus d. The area of the rectangle is a plus b times c plus d. Or you can find each individual rectangle. So this would be AC. This one would be a times d, which is the first two terms. This one is BC, and this one is BD. If you add all those together, you do get that. So just to do another example, x plus 2 times x plus 3. What would that be? I probably would just do FOIL is how I would do it. The first, which is x squared, the outer, 3x, the inner, 2x, and the last. You can also do it the way I did up there. Either way, notice how these combined. And that would be the answer. Moving on to the next page, page 6. There's a warning. You cannot distribute every operation. There's a common mistake, which is to believe that the distributive law applies to all types of operations that involve parentheses. For example, example 4, x plus y squared, believe it or not, is not x squared plus y squared. The answer is no. You can see this by rewriting the left. If I take the left and write what x plus y squared means, and if I FOIL that out, first, outer, inner, last, we get x squared, plus xy, that's not there, plus another xy or yx, y squared, which is not that. We have two extra terms there. Or you can also see this by plugging in values like 2 and 3, for instance. If I plug in 2 and 3 into the left side, you have to add first. If I plug it into the right side, you have to square first from the order of operations. And you can see they're not equivalent. So go ahead and try exercise 2. Pause when you're ready. Are the two expressions equivalent? Are you ready? The answers are yes, no, and no. It does not work for multiplication. I wrote it up here again, and you need a plus. Does not work for square roots either. You can check out